Hi, I'm Eleora. When I was 15, my mother smiled. Actually smiled as she told me to get out of her house, said I'd be back begging in a month. But I never came back, not until 5 years later, when she and my sister needed something from me. They used my name to steal money. They claimed my survival story as their own. They rewrote me out of my own life. But what hurts worse than being thrown out? It's realizing they were still trying to own me long after they erased me. So when we met again, what do you think I said? Or better yet, what would you say? They didn't shout. They didn't throw things. There wasn't a single slammed door until the very end. It was my 15th birthday, and the only sound in the house was the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet clink of utensils against dinner plates. No cake, no candles. Just the four of us sitting in a room that felt smaller than ever. Verena, my mother, sat at the head of the table, upright and emotionless. My father stared into his glass of iced tea like it held answers to the mess he didn't know how to clean up. Bryn, my older sister, kept glancing at her phone, her nails tapping the screen as if this evening were just another obligation. I had just set down my fork when Verena folded her hands together and spoke in that brittle tone she reserved for church meetings and family interventions. "You've made your choices, Eleora," she said. "Time to live with them." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You think we're going to let you stay in this house while you disrespect every value we raised you on?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You don't go to youth group anymore. Your grades are slipping. You're clearly not interested in college. You're becoming a liability." I looked at my dad. He didn't even meet my eyes. Bryn shifted uncomfortably, and then, like clockwork, excused herself to the bathroom. "Coward." "You'll be back," Verena said, her lips curving into a small, satisfied smile. "Begging. Mark my words." She stood up, walked past me, and placed a pillow and a plastic grocery bag filled with my clothes by the front door. "You can go now, or we'll call Pastor Daniels to come and get you." My hands trembled. Not from fear, at least not entirely, from the shock of it all. The room spun, but I stood anyway. I reached for the bag, numb, and stepped outside. She didn't say goodbye. He didn't even flinch. It was spring, but the air bit at my skin. I didn't have a jacket, just a thin, long-sleeved shirt and jeans. I walked down the sidewalk, blinking hard against the tears I refused to let fall. Not because I didn't feel them, because I didn't want to give them that satisfaction. I tried calling my friend Michelle, straight to voicemail. I texted her, just one word, "Help." No reply. I wandered the neighborhood, past porch lights and barking dogs. Eventually, I made my way to the only place that had ever felt halfway safe when everything else fell apart, the middle school. The back gate was still loose on the far side of the building, the one the janitor always forgot to check. The storage closet behind the gym smelled like old rubber and pine sol. There were rolled-up wrestling mats and cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling. I curled up behind one, hugging my pillow. The silence in there was thick, unforgiving, but at least it wasn't judging me. For the next week, that closet became my home. I snuck into the gym showers early in the morning before anyone showed up. I ate crackers from the vending machine when I had coins, and when I didn't, I drank from the faucet and told myself the hunger was temporary. At school, I pretended everything was fine. I laughed when I was supposed to, turned in assignments when I could, wore the same hoodie every day and blamed it on laundry day, again and again. I thought I was invisible. Maybe I wanted to be. But one day, something changed. It was fourth period. History class. The substitute teacher was new. Middle-aged, wire-rimmed glasses. Wore a cardigan like it was armor. As we filed out, she touched my shoulder gently and smiled, but said nothing. I thought it was strange, but didn't think too much of it. Until lunch. I opened my locker, and there, tucked between my textbooks, was a granola bar. Taped to it, a sticky note in neat handwriting. "You're not invisible. I see you." No name, no signature, just those 7 words. I stood there, frozen, the hallway noise fading around me. Something in my chest cracked open. Not with pain, at least not the same kind I'd carried for days, but with a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That note changed everything. There's a kind of smile that doesn't warm a room. It chills it. It stays with you, outlasts the words that come before or after it. My mother gave me one of those smiles when she said I'd come crawling back. And she meant it. Not as a warning, as a wish. It's strange how that sentence, "You'll be back begging in a month," didn't sting right away. It didn't cut or burn. It just sat there, like something unfinished, a threat waiting for a punchline. But the punch never came. Just silence. Then the door. What hurt more was the way she said it. The calm cadence, like she'd been rehearsing it, like it was a line she was waiting to deliver. That smirk on her face, like she was proud of herself, like she thought she was being merciful. "You'll be back." She didn't even say goodbye. My father stood there, arms crossed, not a word in defense or even discomfort. Just quiet. That kind of silence isn't ignorance, it's permission. I've thought about that moment more times than I can count. In job interviews, lying awake at night, in the middle of meetings. That smile would flash through my mind like a bad advertisement. Unshakable. Because Maya Angelou was right. People forget what you said, they forget what you did. But they never forget how you made them feel. A week after leaving, I found myself sitting alone at a 24-hour laundromat with a crumpled $5 bill in one pocket and an ache in my stomach that felt like it might become permanent. I had scraped together enough change to wash the 2 sets of clothes I had been rotating for days. The hoodie I wore had started to stiffen around the sleeves. The jeans were giving out at the knees. I watched the spin cycle like it held answers. I was too numb to cry, too tired to scream. Across from me sat a woman in her 60s folding towels. She didn't look at me, and I didn't try to speak. We existed in the same space, but in separate worlds. Hers likely filled with routine and errands. Mine, with silent survival. It was hard not to remember the last time I stood at an ironing board, trying to make things look right, even when they weren't. A few months before she kicked me out, Verena had been preparing for one of those church fundraisers where she wore pearls and carried on like a senator's wife. I had just come back from school and found her pacing in the hallway, barking orders into the phone. "There's a wrinkle in the collar. I need you to press it, now." She handed me her silk dress without a glance, like I was housekeeping. "No, please, no thank you. Just the usual entitlement." I took the iron and got to work. Steam hissed with every pass, curling into the air like little ghosts. I focused on the seams. She kept pacing. I wanted to ask if I could come with her that night. Not to sit at the front, just to be in the room. To see what it felt like to be included. But she never looked up. Didn't ask how my day was. Didn't notice my shoes had holes in them. Didn't care that I hadn't eaten lunch. I was good enough to iron the dress she'd wear in front of strangers, but not good enough to be seen standing next to her. The irony didn't hit me until later. All the moments I tried to earn her affection were just chores in disguise. I never got an invitation to that gala, but I remember watching her leave that night, head high, smile sharp, dress flawless. And I remember thinking, she looked perfect, because I made her look perfect. Back in the laundromat, I watched my reflection in the vending machine glass. I didn't recognize the girl staring back. She looked like someone trying to disappear. But that seed of bitterness? It was growing, quietly, like something underground, waiting for spring. I left just before sunrise. The sky was cracked open with orange, the kind that comes before a storm. As I stepped outside, I noticed movement in the house across the street. A curtain shifted. Someone watching. For a moment, I wondered if it was one of those neighbors who had seen me leave home with that plastic bag and pillow, and said nothing. Funny how people always pretend not to see you when it's inconvenient. But that morning, standing alone with my bag of warm laundry and blistered hands, I realized something. I didn't need them to see me. Not anymore. Because the smile my mother gave me that night, meant to crush me, had done something else entirely. It lit a fuse. And that note I'd found at school? That anonymous message saying, "You're not invisible, I see you?" That was the match. I kept the note folded in the back pocket of my jeans until the corners softened and the ink started to fade. I must have read it 50 times that week, each time hearing it louder than the last. "You're not invisible, I see you." Whoever wrote it hadn't signed their name, but they didn't have to. Early the next morning, I slipped into the school library before anyone else had a reason to be there. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that reminded you books don't judge. I tucked myself into the corner behind the aisle with the yearbooks, pulled out the only thing I still owned that felt like mine, an old black and white marbled notebook that used to be my journal. I hadn't written in it since the day Verena found it and read it aloud during dinner, like it was evidence in a courtroom. "See? This is the kind of thinking that ruins families," she'd said, waving a passage I wrote about feeling suffocated. But now I opened the notebook again. With a pencil I borrowed from the front desk, I began writing. Not poetry, not confessions. Just observations. The substitute who always left a tissue box by the door. The janitor who kept the door cracked on rainy mornings. The smell of floor wax on Thursdays. The quiet kindness that lived in overlooked places. My own counter-narrative, carved into paper, one word at a time. I taped the note inside the front cover. "Maybe I wasn't a mistake," I wrote. "Maybe I was just misnamed." Later that week, while using the school restroom to wash up before class, I noticed a flyer taped to the back of a stall door. Bold print, all caps. Youth mentorship for those who feel left out. Free meals, free guidance. Thursday evenings, church basement on Pine. It didn't sound glamorous, but nothing in my life was. And after surviving in a janitor's closet for almost 2 weeks, a warm room and a paper plate of spaghetti sounded close to salvation. That Thursday, I sat in the back of the church basement on a metal folding chair. There were maybe 10 of us, each with a different kind of ache hidden in their eyes. At the front stood a woman in her 30s, with sharp cheekbones, a denim jacket, and a clipboard. Solange. She had a calm way of filling a room without dominating it. She didn't ask us to talk. She just handed out a worksheet labeled, "What's one thing you'd want to learn if no one could stop you?" I stared at it for a long time. After the session, as I helped stack chairs, Solange approached me. "You ever think about applying for programs beyond high school?" she asked gently. I shrugged. "Doesn't matter. I don't have the paperwork or a home address." She nodded slowly, like that didn't scare her off. "There's a scholarship program for people exactly like you. No address needed, just proof that you're trying." I didn't ask how she knew. I think she just did. The next meeting, she came with a printed application and sat beside me while I filled it out, line by line. Where it asked for an emergency contact, I hesitated. "You can leave it blank," she said softly. "Some people don't come with backup." She took the packet from me when I finished. "I'll make sure it gets where it needs to go." She never said, "I believe in you." She didn't need to. She showed me. Weeks passed. I kept going to the mentorship sessions. I kept journaling. I started holding eye contact longer, stopped apologizing for needing space. Solange never pushed, never pried. Just handed me knowledge in digestible doses. Then, one afternoon, Pastor Riley from the church called me into his office. "You got a letter?" he said, sliding a white envelope across the desk. The return address read, "Foundation for Youth Opportunity." I held it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a single sheet. Acceptance, partial scholarship, career prep program with housing included. I didn't cry. I just stared at that paper like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. It wasn't the scholarship that changed everything. It was knowing someone thought I was worth the stamp. I held the scholarship letter in my hands like it might evaporate. Downstairs in the church basement, surrounded by flickering fluorescent lights and folding chairs that creaked whenever you shifted, I sat alone for a moment longer than I needed to. I'd finally won something that couldn't be stripped away with a glare or a guilt trip. But even then, something about it felt unsettled. Some victories don't taste sweet. They taste like silence finally being broken. When I returned to the upstairs lobby to grab a granola bar from the snack basket, Pastor Riley waved me over. "You might want to see this," he said, handing me a copy of the church newsletter. My name was printed in bold under the headline, "Local Teen Receives Life-Changing Opportunity." It was a short blurb about my scholarship, where I came from, what I'd overcome, the program that had selected me. But by that evening, that very same article, identical, word for word, had been posted on the church Facebook group with a photo of Bryn underneath. Captioned, "So proud of our Bryn for mentoring youth and earning this incredible opportunity." I stared at my phone, scrolling through the comments. "Such an inspiration, Bryn! Knew you'd do great things! All that volunteering paid off," I called her. "You knew it was mine," I said, my voice flat. She didn't even pause. "You left. Someone had to keep the family's name respectable." She said it like I was a problem they had to solve, a shadow they had to erase. "It wasn't yours to take," I replied. "And yet," she said casually, "you weren't using it." I hung up. Later that week, I bumped into Melissa, an old friend from school, at the grocery store. She smiled and hugged me like nothing had happened. "Hey, I saw the post. Congrats on the scholarship. Bryn said you two worked on it together?" I blinked. "She said that?" "Yeah, said she helped you fill it out. Said it was part of her mentoring project for youth outreach." I didn't say a word, just nodded slowly and walked away, heart thudding against my ribs like it was trying to warn me. It wasn't just stealing credit, it was erasing me while I was still alive. 2 days later, a small-town paper ran a feature, "Hometown Heroes, Youth Breaking Barriers." There it was again. My story. My struggle. The late nights at the church basement. The resilience. All of it. But not my name. Not my face. The article was paired with a photo of Bryn, standing with folded arms and a rehearsed smile in front of the very church where Solange had once handed me that scholarship application. The caption, "Bryn Taylor, local advocate and recipient of the Foundation for Youth Opportunity Scholarship." I clicked the photo and stared at it until the screen blurred. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat with it, like you sit with a diagnosis. Not surprised, just hollow. I remembered a ballet recital from years back. I was 7, Bryn 10. We both auditioned for the lead. I danced like I wanted to disappear into the music. She danced like she wanted the spotlight to owe her something. She got the part. I was cast as a tree, a literal tree. That day, our mother had pulled me aside backstage and said, "Be proud of your sister. She makes us look good." It wasn't meant to hurt, but it stuck. Now, years later, that same philosophy played out on a larger stage. She made them look good. Me? I made them uncomfortable. I printed the article, took a red pen and circled every lie, every twisted fact, every piece of me dressed in her name. I taped it above my bed in the shared apartment, next to the note from my locker and the scholarship letter with my real name on it. They could try to take the name, but I'd make sure it burned when I took it back. Some people steal money, others steal memories. But the worst theft is when someone takes your name, signs it where it doesn't belong, and dares to call it love. I was sitting on the floor of my shared apartment, a dim lamp flickering over a crumpled spiral notebook on my lap. I'd started writing everything down, dates, names, emails. Not because I had a plan yet, but because I knew something wasn't right. Something had shifted since the article came out with Bryn's face and my story beneath it. A week after that article, an email landed in my inbox. It was from the Federal Student Aid Office, asking for clarification on a loan application. The subject line alone made my stomach twist. I hadn't applied for any loans. I was barely surviving off a partial scholarship and whatever side work Solange could help me find. I reread the email 3 times before logging into the government site. There it was. My name, my social. Loan application submitted 3 months ago. Co-signed, digitally, by Verena. The address listed? Our old house. A line of fake tax records and enrollment confirmations. They had used my identity, filed for loans in my name, claimed I was still living under their roof, that they were supporting me through school. All while I'd been sleeping under a leaking ceiling and eating peanut butter from a spoon. I didn't call them, didn't rage. I screenshotted everything, every email, every application, every fake address. I ordered my full credit report. I printed it and circled every unfamiliar line in red pen, just like I'd done with that article. To them, I was a ghost who signed papers, but didn't need food or shelter. To them, my name wasn't a person, it was a tool. A week later, I walked into the district office downtown. I needed a copy of my high school records for a job application Solange had helped line up. The clerk behind the glass was polite until she looked at her screen. "I'm sorry, only a parent or legal guardian can access these records, unless you're under official care or have legal emancipation paperwork." I inhaled slowly. "I'm the student. The record is mine." Her lips pursed. "Policy is policy." That night, I stayed up searching. I found an old school ID in the bottom of a box, faded but usable. I printed off an email trail with the foundation. I pulled up a mock utility bill template, inserted the address they had filed under my name. I used their system, their tactics. The next morning, I returned with the ID, the fake mail, and the papers. I slid them across the counter with steady hands. I signed the release form using the exact same signature Verena had used on the loan application. The clerk didn't flinch, just stamped the file and handed me a sealed manila envelope. "Here you go." I walked out, each step a little heavier with clarity. The hallway smelled like copier ink and lemon cleaner, sterile, unfeeling. But the envelope in my hand buzzed with meaning. Sometimes, to reclaim who you are, you have to walk into their world dressed in the armor they created. At home, I sat on the edge of my mattress, pulled out a black Sharpie, and wrote my name on the envelope. Big. Clear. Eliora Taylor. Then I underlined it. Twice. The folding chair was colder than I expected. Even through my jeans, I could feel the chill in the plastic press into my skin. The auditorium was full of murmurs, rustling papers, parents with cell phones poised to record, and the faint hum of a microphone being tested. Names were called, applause followed. I sat still, my hands folded neatly in my lap, eyes on the empty seat in the front row, the one that used to have my name taped to the back. They'd removed it. Just 24 hours earlier, I had received the invitation from a guidance counselor who knew about my GED scores and the mentorship program I'd completed. "You're being recognized, quietly, but it matters," she said. I wasn't expecting a banner or a marching band, just acknowledgement, but that was apparently too much to ask. Before the ceremony began, the principal had pulled me aside, adjusting his tie nervously. "We're so sorry, Eliora. Since there's no parent or guardian listed on file, we can't present the award publicly. It's protocol." Protocol. That word sounded like bleach, meant to sanitize everything it touched. So I clapped for everyone else, smiled at kids who waved from the stage. My applause was steady, my chest hollow. A classmate from my old school leaned over, her lip gloss shimmering under the lights. "Hey, weren't you supposed to get something tonight?" she whispered. I shrugged. Guess not. But inside, I felt that slow, familiar ache, the one that comes from being erased in real time. I reached into my coat pocket and pressed my fingers against the edges of my journal. Later that night, I would write, "They erased me in a room full of lights," and nobody even blinked. After the ceremony, I skipped the awkward mingling and headed straight back to the apartment. The hallway was dimly lit as always. My roommate had left a microwave dinner out on the counter with a sticky note. "Eat. You forget." I dropped my bag on the couch and unzipped the old backpack I hadn't used since high school. I needed space for new books Solange had handed me earlier that week. As I shuffled through worn notebooks and a crushed granola bar wrapper, My fingers brushed something stiff tucked in the back zipper. An envelope. Yellowed. Unmarked. But I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my grandmother's. Sharp loops, steady lines. Her penmanship never wavered, even when her voice started to. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. The letter was dated months ago. The ink was slightly smudged at the bottom, like it had been gripped too tightly. Eleora, I heard them. That night in the kitchen. Your mother didn't kick you out because she thought it was best. She did it because the church board had started asking questions. She was more afraid of losing her image than losing you. I sat down slowly, letting the paper rest on my knees. There's more. You were always the stronger one, the brighter one. She saw it, and she hated it. Not because she didn't love you, because she didn't know how to love someone she couldn't control. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The validation was heavier than grief. It was the kind of weight that didn't crush, it grounded. At the bottom of the page was one final line. We both know you were the better version of her, but she never forgave you for that. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it against my chest, then walked over to the journal and taped it inside the front cover, opposite the note I'd found in my locker months ago. The pages crackled slightly as they met. I didn't call Grandma, didn't text Solange, didn't post about it online. I just stood in the hallway outside my room, staring at the closed door like it was something sacred. And I whispered to no one in particular. No more erasing, not even by silence. The chairs in the conference room were too close together. I shifted in mine, knees knocking lightly against the metal leg of the table, and kept my arms folded in my lap to stay grounded. The networking panel had started 15 minutes ago, and I'd listened to 3 speakers already. Nonprofit reps, local mentors, a woman who ran a food co-op for single mothers. Then came the next name on the schedule. Next up, please welcome Bryn Taylor, community leader and youth advocate. I blinked. The name took a second to register because it wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't on the printed program. My sister walked onto the stage in nude heels, a blazer she used to borrow from our mother, and a smile that made my skin crawl. She took the microphone like she'd done this before. I want to talk today about transformation, not just personal, but generational. My family struggled for years, but I took that pain and turned it into service. Mentoring youth, advocating for underserved teens, especially those who've been forgotten. The words floated into the air like perfume, sweet-sounding, surface-polished, and completely stolen. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stared. She shared a story about a girl, unnamed of course, who lived out of a gym storage closet after being kicked out of her home. She described how they worked through scholarships, community, and faith. It was watching her fight that reminded me who I wanted to be, she said. No one knew that girl was me, because the person claiming credit had rewritten the story just enough to make it hers. People clapped. Some stood. A woman near me wiped her eye. I sat frozen. Not with shock. Shock had left me months ago. What I felt was heat, low and rising. Like something long buried was finally close to surfacing. It was my pain she polished, I thought. My ruin she rebranded. As she stepped off stage, the moderator thanked her with admiration. You're the kind of leader this community needs, Bryn. To my left, my friend Kayla leaned over. She'd known me long enough to read my face. She pulled out her phone and typed something quickly, then tapped the screen to show me. A tweet. Just posted. Weird. This girl is stealing her sister's life story and acting like no one's watching. PR queen or thief? I stared at the tweet. Then at Bryn, standing near the back with a paper cup of punch and that same plastic smile she'd worn for years. By the time the next speaker began, Kayla's tweet had already gained traction. A few comments, then a few reposts. Then photos started appearing. Me in the church basement, me at Solange's mentorship table, me handing out flyers at youth events. All time-stamped, all verifiable. None of them with Bryn. The comment section lit up. Wait, wasn't that Eleora's project? Why is Bryn taking credit? This is shady as hell. Bryn saw it. I watched her eyes dart to her phone, her posture stiffen, her fingers fumble to scroll. She tried to smile, but it didn't hold. An hour later, someone from the foundation staff approached her during the coffee break. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the tone. Concern, hesitation. Then the kind of look people give when they realize they've backed the wrong horse. I stayed silent, watched. By the time the panel resumed, half the room knew, or suspected. And Bryn? She suddenly had nothing left to say. When my name was finally called, I stood slowly, walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked straight at her. Let me tell you who that story really belonged to. Downtown Asheville felt unfamiliar in formal wear. I stood in the corridor outside the ballroom of the Civic Center, smoothing the hem of my borrowed black dress, trying to focus on the hum of soft jazz slipping through the walls. The Youth Leader Honors Gala had drawn donors, community leaders, even a few local politicians. My name was on the program, just not my photo. They wanted the impact without the scandal. Fine by me. What they didn't know was that my mother and sister had RSVP'd. Verena and Bryn had caught wind through a church acquaintance who loved to gossip. Of course they showed up. They always did when there was a camera or a nameplate involved. I stood behind the curtain, waiting for the MC to introduce me. The applause had faded. I took a slow breath, and then I heard it. And now, our keynote speaker, Eleora Taylor. Gasps. Audible. I stepped onto the stage and looked directly at them, Verena in a navy suit, Bryn clenching her clutch like it was oxygen. I didn't speak out of anger. I spoke like someone who'd been silent long enough. I used to believe being kicked out was the worst thing that happened to me, I said. But it wasn't. Being erased was. I told them about the scholarship they took credit for, about the story twisted to shine their shoes. I told them about surviving in a storage closet and still showing up every morning like I'd slept in a bed. They erased me, but I rewrote myself with a thicker pen. There was no applause at first, just stillness. Tension you could butter and serve. Then, slowly, it came. Soft claps. A few people stood, a few more. I looked back once. Verena's mouth was tight. Bryn's eyes were glassy. After my final line, I'm not here because of them. I'm here despite them. I turned toward the wings. That's when Verena stood. We just want to say how proud we are of our daughter. She moved toward the stage, hand outstretched like she was owed space. Bryn followed, 2 steps behind. Before she could reach the microphone, a staff member stepped in. Calm, professional, firm. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your seat. The mic went dead. Verena tried again. We raised her to be strong. That's what this is. Family! The staffer repeated, louder this time. This evening celebrates independence, not manipulation. Security didn't touch her. They didn't have to. She was already shrinking. I didn't say a word, didn't blink. I stepped back from the podium and let the silence finish what I started. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. That quote had stayed with me since Solange scribbled it on a napkin one night after a long mentoring session. I finally understood it now. I left the stage slowly, 1 step at a time. The applause began again, louder this time, not just out of respect, but from recognition. At the edge of the ballroom, just as I reached the door, I heard it. A single clap. Then another, until it became a room of noise that couldn't be silenced. The knock came just after noon. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I stood there frozen, hand hovering over the doorknob. Through the peephole, I saw Verena's hair pulled tight and polished like always. Bryn stood behind her, her mouth tight and eyes restless. I opened the door halfway, didn't invite them in. We're about to lose the house, Verena said, before I could even ask why they were there. You can help. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had unfolded just days before at the gala. Just a plea, sugar-coated in entitlement. Why would I? I asked. Because it's your family's home, Bryn said, her voice flat but defensive. Because you care. I stepped back, just far enough to open a drawer behind me and pull out a file folder. Quietly, I handed it to them. Inside were photocopies of savings account statements, my old summer job deposits from when I was 15, 16. The account had been opened in my name. Verena had signed it over to herself 2 months before they bought the house. I said nothing while they read. Verena didn't look up. That was family money. I kept my voice calm. You used it to buy bricks. Then you built walls between us with them. Bryn opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. I'm not here to rehash it. I'm here to make something clear. I didn't walk away from that house. You pushed me out of it. And now you want me to fix what you broke? Neither responded. I continued. I didn't owe you rescue. You owed me recognition. They left without the help they came for. But it wouldn't be their last attempt. 2 days later, I visited the hospital where my grandmother had been recovering from a minor stroke. She'd been in and out for a week, but I hadn't gone yet. Not because I didn't care, but because I was still carrying the weight of her silence all these years. When I walked into her room, Verena and Bryn were already there, flanking her like guards. My grandmother looked small under the hospital blanket, her hair thinner than I remembered. Then, just as I stepped closer, her eyes opened. She blinked slowly, took a shaky breath, and looked past both of them. Why did you do that to her? She asked. The room froze. Verena stiffened. Bryn's face flushed pink. Grandma didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. No one answered. A nurse who had just walked in paused mid-step. Her eyes flicked to me, then to Verena, and something in her gaze shifted. She saw it too, what had been hidden for so long. I didn't speak, didn't cry. I just nodded once at Grandma, a silent acknowledgement. That night, back in my apartment, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a check. Not the full amount they needed, just enough to keep them from losing the house immediately. I slid it into an envelope with a single note. This doesn't buy forgiveness, just closure. You can keep the house. I already built my home. I was sipping lukewarm coffee in my office when the email landed. The subject line read simply, "Is this you?" Below it was a YouTube link from an unknown sender. Curiosity mixed with caution as I clicked. There I was. 15 years old, standing on the front lawn with a pillow under my arm and a plastic bag dangling from my wrist. Verena in the doorway, arms crossed. My father, silent as always. The video wasn't high quality. It looked like it had been filmed through blinds, but it was clear enough. You'll be back begging in a month. Verena's voice echoed from the screen, distorted but unmistakable. In less than 60 seconds, the world saw what I'd lived through for 5 years. The comments section exploded. People posted clips, dissecting every second. Former classmates started sharing it, some with shame, some with shock. I went to school with her, one wrote. We never knew. We just thought she was weird. Another. I remember that day. I thought she moved in with a relative. It went viral faster than I could process it. News blogs picked it up. Headlines appeared like clockwork. Church mom exposed for kicking out teen. Scholarship winner was homeless, and nobody noticed. My inbox filled with messages, some from strangers offering solidarity, others from reporters sniffing for sound bites. My name was trending, not as a victim, but as a woman who survived what too many still endure in silence. Someone tweeted, "The internet never forgets. It just waits for context." They weren't wrong. 2 days later, I was back at my grandmother's place, helping clean out her bedroom for the in-home nurse setup. She was moving slower these days, more forgetful, but still sharp in the moments that mattered. I was sorting through a drawer when I found it. An envelope addressed to me in Verena's handwriting. No stamp, never mailed. Inside was a letter, dated 2 years ago. Eleora, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just don't know who I am without control. I did things out of fear of being judged, fear of what people would say if they knew our family wasn't perfect. I didn't protect you. I protected myself. And I'm ashamed. I never stopped loving you. But I know that's not enough. Verena. I read it twice. It wasn't meant for forgiveness. It was a preemptive act, written just in case things turned public. A strategy, not a confession. I folded it slowly and placed it inside my journal, beside the note from Grandma. The one that finally called it what it was. Rejection in disguise. Two truths side by side. One never spoken. The other never meant to be found. Later that night, another email arrived. This time from a producer. A talk show. National. They'd seen the clip. They wanted my story. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box. Thought about every time I'd been silenced. Thought about how my voice had once trembled when I introduced myself. Not anymore. I whispered out loud to no one. They tried to keep me quiet. Now I have the mic. The days that followed the talk show offer blurred together, but not in the way grief does. It was more like a slow unraveling of noise I no longer needed to hear. For once, silence was mine. Not something imposed, but something chosen. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring in through the windows of my apartment. My phone buzzed with emails from producers, journalists, strangers. Among them was one from Verena. The subject line read, "A conversation." I opened it out of curiosity, not hope. The message was carefully constructed, too careful. Sentences trimmed of emotion, words shaped to appear sincere but neutral. "We know things have been difficult," it read. "We'd like to reconnect. Maybe we can rebuild something meaningful." And then the final line, "You'll always be our daughter." I stared at those words longer than I should have. I didn't feel anger, not even sadness, just clarity. It wasn't the apology I wanted. It was the silence I chose. Later that afternoon, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a thick folder I hadn't touched in months. Inside were the sealed letters, my GED certificate, Grandma's handwritten note, Verena's unsent apology, pages of proof that I hadn't imagined what they did to me, evidence of who I became in spite of it. I wrote one more label for the folder. Closed chapters. That weekend, I hosted dinner for Solange and two friends who had once been mentors, but had since become something more solid than any family title. We sat around my small dining table, passing mismatched plates and stories. Midway through dessert, Solange lifted her glass. "To Eliora," she said, voice steady. "The woman who built her home without blueprints." I raised mine too, but couldn't find words. I didn't need them. For the first time, the silence at the table wasn't cold. It was full. After everyone left and the dishes were drying in the rack, I sat down with my journal for the first time in what felt like forever. The pen felt heavier now, not with burden, but with worth. I wrote, "I am not what they lost. I am what I found, and that is enough." Then I lit a candle, not for grief, not for ritual, but just for presence, for being here, for having arrived on my own terms. The letter arrived late, hand-delivered by courier in a stiff white envelope marked confidential. I already knew what it was before I opened it. People like Verena and Bryn don't knock anymore. They send things. Requests that sound like apologies. Offers dressed up as invitations. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed in neutral legalese. They wanted a joint public reconciliation appearance. The words sounded soft, polished, almost reasonable, but I could hear the real voice behind it. Not peace, performance. I folded the letter once and placed it on my desk. My hands didn't shake. 2 days later, we met in a conference room at the county courthouse. Neutral ground. I brought my attorney. They brought their desperation. Verena wore pearls. Bryn wore a blazer I'd seen her fake on Instagram 2 weeks prior. I laid out the documents, copies of forged loan applications, my stolen scholarship records, the viral video transcript, the op-ed that broke their facade. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. "I'm not pressing charges," I said plainly. "But here's the offer. You publicly waive all familial claims. No more statements, interviews, or photo ops with my name. In return, I'll issue a one-time check. It will cover the house payment, nothing more. Bryn blinked. That's extortion. My lawyer responded before I could. It's a private settlement offer, perfectly legal and very generous. Farina's lip quivered. We were just trying to… No, I cut in. You were trying to reclaim something you abandoned the minute it stopped serving you. She opened her mouth again, but I kept going. You don't get to fail me twice, and still call me daughter. They signed. The ink dried before the room exhaled. The next morning, I published a piece I'd written weeks ago, but saved for the right moment. The headline read, "The Family That Taught Me What Strength Isn't." It didn't scream. It didn't accuse. It told the story the way I lived it. Raw, cold in places, but real. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Not for drama, but for truth. Emails poured in from people who had cut ties with toxic families and never looked back. People who had been told to stay quiet for the sake of appearances. My story became a blueprint for those who needed permission to leave behind the lie. They invited me to speak on panels, at schools, on podcasts. I never once used Farina's name. I didn't need to. Months later, I mailed the check. Folded between the pages was a photo of me standing at that podium during the gala, the night everything turned. On the back, I'd written, "This is who I became, without you." That evening, I opened my journal for the last entry in this chapter of my life. Some doors don't deserve to be left open. Some last names don't deserve to be passed down. I am not who they raised. I am who I rebuilt,